Welcome to the Voice of Supply Chain, brought to you by ISM New Jersey. I am your host, Katherine McCleery. And as always, we are here to tell the personal and very interesting stories of people in supply chain doing extraordinary things. And today's guest is someone who checks all the boxes and then some. Her career story is bold. It's inspiring, packed with so much insight and wisdom. I feel like it'll make you want to take a few bigger swings in your own career journey after hearing hers. Today, we're going to have Camille Batiste on the show. She's globally recognized in supply chain and procurement as an executive. Her track record of leading large scale transformations is second to none. She's held executive roles at companies like Honeywell and ADM, where she built procurement organizations from the ground up. She's tripled value generation in those organizations and led teams through complex global change. Um, she's known for bold leadership, and I think you're going to see that today, and her ability to turn vision into action. And I can't wait for everybody to meet her. So here she is. Welcome, Camille.
Hi, Catherine. So good to be here. Thanks for that introduction, actually. I'd love to meet that person you were talking about. She sounds amazing.
Well, she is amazing, and I'm glad that our audience gets to meet you. I'm sure if anybody's familiar with ISM, they've seen your name or seen your face at an event. And we were just talking about you being on the panel for a women's leadership event. I meant to ask you, do you have any other ISM events on the schedule this year?
Oh, I'm glad you asked, actually. I will be speaking at the ISM World Conference in Orlando. And we're going to do a session on kind of going through my career, but lessons that I've learned along the way. And there'll be a special treat at the end of that panel. So, or that presentation. So if you are going to ISM World, if you're not going to ISM World, you need to go. And if you are going, sign up for my session.
Okay, everybody, you got your marching orders. I think after today, you'll be running to get your ticket. This might be like your kind of like your trial run, your practice run
Yeah,
of
there we
of telling
go.
your career story.
Sounds
And
good.
a quick reminder before we get into the interview, if you are watching live and you have questions, please put them in the chat. We see them as they come through, and we'll be happy to answer and say hello as well. So this is like my typical question I ask everybody that we don't prepare for, but I love the results. Um,
Okay.
just describe yourself in 3 words.
Visionary, crazy, and caring.
Okay, visionary, crazy, and caring. I think
Yeah.
I think we'll
BCC.
yeah, we'll cover a few of those. I think that aligns pretty well to what we're going to talk about. And then I'm going to switch things up. This is my
Okay.
ninth show I've done for Voice of Supply Chain, and I feel like I kind of want to switch it up with you for some reason.
Okay.
Um, what's a book that you've read recently that's been a great source of guidance for you?
Atomic Habits, hands down.
Okay.
Atomic Habits by James Clear. I recommend that book to everybody that I talk to. There's really nothing fabulously new in any of the books that we read, right? And it's all the same, but he packages this concept of making incremental changes in your life and gives us great pragmatic ideas of how to incorporate those habits in your life so that it's easier, right? It's not just go do a thing, but here's ways that you can connect that thing so that you can make it easier to actually implement in your life. I just think that book was life changing for me. And so, hands down, without even thinking about it, be short of the Bible or something, Atomic
Yeah.
Habits, James Clear, go get it.
I have it actually on my bookshelf.
Uh huh.
Um, a boss a few years ago. sent it to me to read before I started my job, and I got through some of it. I haven't finished it, but I will now. I will now.
Yes, it's worth it. Absolutely.
And then, what's something people would be surprised to learn about you?
Well, it depends, right? It depends on how well you know me. So people who know me know that I'm from Jamaica. I mentioned earlier that that's where I am right now. I hate the beach. Not hate. I just don't like sand. I like the idea of the beach. I like the breeze. I like the drinks with the umbrellas. I like somebody bringing that to me. But the sand, just I don't. So I'm an island girl who doesn't like the beach.
Well, that is very surprising. You
Indeed.
like the ambiance.
Yes, the environment, but not maybe it's the work, right? When you have to like clean all the sand off and then no, not it's
Mm,
not worth that. But I can be, by the beach
fair enough.
in a
Fair enough.
restaurant next to the beach is good.
Well, and speaking of, you're in Jamaica right now, correct?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. And you grew up in Jamaica, which leads
I
us right
did.
into my first question for you.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about growing up. You are one of six kids. What was life like as a young Jamaican girl?
Yeah. So yes, thank you for the question. I am number five of six. It was boy, 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 girl, girl, boy. So I decided the story of my life is that my parents really wanted a girl and they kept on trying, like boy, 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 girl. And then went, oh, a girl, let's try for a better one. And then they got me and they go, oh, she's amazing. Let's try for another one. And they got my brother. And so they're like, yeah, we're we're done. Camille's the best, Camille's the height. And they still think that to this day. No, I am kidding. I grew up in a home that prioritized education, that prioritized hard work. My parents are professionals and then entrepreneurs, and that was just always kind of pressed on us to seek uh, academic success, life success, and the way to get that was primarily through education. So they pushed that a lot. I grew up in a British education system, if anybody's aware of how that works, where you're really evaluated not on what your own teachers think of you, but what the standards that are set by somebody else do. And so you would take these exams when you're 15 or 16 years old, and those exams really kind of set your life. And so you had to specialize very early and you studied really hard because you never knew what you were going to get. So it was my whole life growing up was around academics. I was a bit of a rebel though. And so while I was on the science track, I would like sneak in some other classes like French or he's not even history. I'm lying. Only French. All the other stuff was science related. But so that's one piece of it in terms of the academic um, prowess that I had, and I was incredibly competitive when it came to academics. So my goal in life was to be number one in my class, and I remember the first time I was not. I was number two. I was 13. I was bawling, and my brother was like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And so my sister finally goes, "She's crying because she was number two in her class." My brother, who is not Mr. Competitive, is like, whatever. I'm not sorry for her anymore. But it mattered to me. So academics was everything, and I was just like extremely competitive, and my whole identity, for good or bad, and it turns out to actually be a bad thing. At the time, I didn't think that, but for good or bad, it became my identity and who I was. And we may get to when that broke later on in life.
Do you think that's an outcome of being one of five, where and with siblings older than you that you're
Yes.
trying to keep up with? I feel that too.
Yeah.
I'm the youngest of four, and
Oh yeah. I think so, and a girl at that. So the boys were playing, in Jamaica you play cricket or football, and always wanted to kind of play with them and keep up. But yeah, and my parents, again, maybe not the wisest thing now looking back, but they also did that kind of comparison, right? So I saw how invested they were in the successes or lack thereof of some of my siblings and how they praised great grades and how they didn't like bad ones. But it wasn't like they didn't like the bad grades. They went out and found resources. If you're struggling in math, they're going to find a tutor for you in math. If you're struggling in English, you're going to find help. And so I always wanted to be maybe less of a burden. And I'm going through the psychoanalysis right now, Catherine. Like why I wasn't looking for attention. I was looking for less attention. Like I didn't want them to have to go find somebody to help me and be on top of me to do my homework. So my homework was done and I didn't need help because I was self-sufficient. And why that is now,
That's
we'll have to come back, a
that's a
year from now.
Scorpio trait.
It's
Sorry, it is. For those for
like,
those that for those that like or dislike astrology, you might hear a few of those little clues today. Well, I want to know, like, was there a moment, early in your life, childhood, where you, or maybe a time period, maybe not a
Mhm.
moment, where you thought to yourself, I want to go far and I want to do something big? Like that kind of like led you to
Yeah.
the next steps. I guess maybe in that high school range where you're trying to decide what you want to do with your, college academics.
Hmm. Hmm. I think maybe, like you said, time period. So in Jamaica, there's elementary school, we call it prep school or primary school, which is grades 1 through 6, and then 7 through 11 is high school, and then there's 2 extra years of advanced, which you call A levels. So those years in high school then are from 11 to 17 for me. So those are formative years, of course. And back to just being competitive, I think the school that I went to was also quite competitive. And we're just like my parents, where they would praise success in academics. And so teachers were great about opening the aperture and sharing with us how far we could go. Even though it's a small island, the world was available to us. And we had guidance counselors who would tell us that we could go to school anywhere that we wanted. It's really up to us to to decide how far you want to go or how high you wanted to aspire. And our parents would say the same thing. We'll pay for your school. Your job is to get in. And so aim for the best, aim to be the best. And so I think the teachers, the environment, the parents, my parents always set that expectation that you can go as high as you want to go. I wanted to go far geographically from my family because I felt like I needed to build independence. And so while all of these, I'm telling you all these great things, I think when you're in that environment that is so protected, um, you don't realize how much is being done for you. And so, for example, I was really shy back then. So the concept of calling somebody to ask them a question, I wouldn't do that. So my mom would do that for me. Well, when you go away, that's just not available. So I had to learn to do some of these things for myself. And so I really realized I had to grow up. And so I chose to go geographically far away from home. But in terms of the aspiration, I thought I could do anything. I was so built up as a graduating high school, or I don't want to say senior because that's not a term they use, but coming out of high school and coming to the US, I was the boss. I knew everything. I was going to college to just show them how it's done because I am just amazing. And so I love that about my upbringing. It should have been tempered a little bit, but the next stage helped with the tempering.
Yeah, you had a healthy confidence. I think starting with too much is probably better than starting with not enough. It's
That's a good point.
a lot harder to build confidence than it is to pare it
Mhm.
back and to be
Indeed,
humbled.
indeed.
And so you ended up going to Stanford,
Yes.
and I remember you telling me your first year was I'm the I'm the best, right? And then
Mhm.
wasn't it your second year where you were humbled?
Mhm. Indeed. Yeah. So my first year, we had a class called I don't remember the name of it, but it was sort of engineering fundamentals, and it was and it was just a like a 1 unit class. It wasn't a real class, but they went through every field of engineering kind of at a very high level, so that if you were thinking about engineering, you knew enough about each one to make a choice. And so, I'm like, okay, I have a question, right? Uh, which engineering field delivers graduates that make the most money coming straight out of college? So that's question number one. And then the second question was, which is the hardest, most challenging major that you have? And the answers to both questions were the same. It was two: petroleum engineering and chemical engineering. And so that's how I made my decision on my major, right? So it was like, okay, I don't want to do petroleum engineering because it kind of limits you a little bit. Chemical engineering, sign me up because I'm amazing, right? And I can do whatever, but I can make a lot of money. So those two things were very, very important to me. I forgot your question already, Catherine.
Oh, no, I mean, you answered it. I think we were just flowing. Like the question
Hmm.
originally was there a moment when you wanted to do something big? But I think you've answered it. And
Hmm.
then talking about how your second year humbled you.
Yes, yes. So the first year, so because I did the advanced high school, um, you get college credit for that work. And so I didn't have to take the first year of chemistry there. So I got credit for that. But I did take the first year of physics, which I actually don't love. And so I had a great first year. We had some fundamental classes in terms of Western civilization, so humanities classes. I took some fun electives, and then even my base classes and calculus, et cetera, were fine. So sophomore year, I then start taking the upper level chemistry classes, and I'm like chemistry whiz lady, perfect scores on my achievement tests, and again, I'm amazing, and I was failing. Um, I don't what I don't know how to fail. And I really had an existential crisis, which turned out and provided a spiritual solution. And part of that was just finding people who I could relate to, who could help me through that process, both my parents and having them available for me, but finding a group of friends. And I think that the change there for me. So I went through that struggle, and that's where I was humbled and broken. And it wasn't just me. I had a roommate who was brilliant from Sri Lanka, and she was taking electrical engineering and bawling. And I'm looking at her like, "You're bawling. Um, what can I expect from me?" So it just, I think these types of schools, they're great. We love them. I'm happy to be a Stanford graduate. I'm a proud Cardinal. But if you, if you choose a path of, I'm going to do the hardest thing you've got, you're going to get it. But what I got out of that, and actually what has built who I am today and built me as a leader today, is recognizing that it's not just about this technical capability. It's not just about academic prowess when it comes to school or in work. It's not about the technical capability or even the performance in the job, getting the day to day done. The way that you multiply your effectiveness in the organization, and the way that I could multiply my effectiveness and my joy in school, was not only doing the schoolwork, but investing in people, investing in friendships, connecting with professors, connecting with those friends. And so now I came out of Stanford. I have a decent GPA, enough to get my first job, and that's all that matters. But I've come out with amazing friendships that I have to this day. And so to me, I got the best benefit out of that experience because I was humbled, because I learned that lesson at that time frame in my life. I was able to deploy those lessons in the rest of my career. So as much as it was terrible while I was going through it, I'm deeply grateful that I had that experience.
I love that phrase of multiplying your effectiveness and your impact. I, that is, I hope that's the title of your book that you're going to be
Okay,
writing.
let me write that down.
Yeah, because isn't that the truth? I've been in startups for a while now, and we always talk about whatever process we set up. It has to be scalable because we will grow and your team will get larger, and you have to be effective as a large team. And so it's kind of a similar mindset. But going into it as like a one person, department sometimes, having that frame of mind of how can I multiply my effectiveness? I like that approach. That is a little bit more personal to like your own skill set versus you know, what the business needs. So it's more applicable
Mhm.
to other areas of the life. And yeah, that's genius.
Mhm. Mhm. And it's as we're transitioning from individual contributor roles to leadership roles, there are many challenges, and that's certainly one of them, because you go into that first leadership role thinking, what got me here was me working individually and working very hard. But when you're in leadership, it's not about me working individually and working very hard. It's about me working very hard to inspire, to bring up the next generation of leaders. And it's a different skill set. They're both work, but one of them is around deploying those skills and the influencing skills, the communication skills, empathy, which are skills that you build in life that you can apply at work. And that's what when I'm coaching people, I really emphasize that side of development, because the higher up you go in the organization, the more critical those skills become versus the technical skills.
Oh, you just jumped to section 5 of
Sorry, we can come back.
no, it's great. It's great. It's great because you and I had the same we had alignment there with our brains and how we were gonna
Mhm.
go through today. So that's we'll put a pin in that. We'll come back.
Okay.
Um, I want to talk a little bit about like your first I call it a big girl job. Like when
Mhm.
when you're leaving college and you're going into your industry. Like I know you had a teaching job and then you transitioned to Kaiser Aluminum, right?
Mhm. Yes.
So you stepped into this role. You were the first woman engineer at this manufacturing plant. And this was also during a strike. Tell
Yes.
me tell me about that chaos.
I was living in California at the time. That's another kind of short stint that I had. Some friends of mine said, "Hey, if you want to get a job, come back to the U.S." And so I'd moved back to Jamaica to teach, and they had encouraged me to move back to the U.S. But I got this amazing offer to work for Kaiser Aluminum in Louisiana, and eventually moved back to Jamaica, which I thought was, oh, that's perfection right there. And so I got there, let's say on a Wednesday, and I went to the plant. I had my medical, and I don't know if they do that anymore in chemical plants. And I was supposed to start work on Monday. And on the Friday afternoon, I get a call that says, "Hey, maybe it was Thursday. We think we're gonna have a strike. And so what you need to do is tomorrow morning, you need to go to this safety training place. You're gonna get 8 hours of safety training, and then you're gonna drive to the facility, pack for a week."
Okay.
Roger. And so I did that. And sure enough, as I was driving into, they had a really long driveway. As I was driving into the facility, all the trucks were driving out. And that was my first night at work, running up, not me running it, I was doing something silly, but my first day on the job as a chemical engineer was during a strike. So the workers had walked out, and at that point, management was running the plant. We didn't have any extra workers yet. And I learned a lot. I learned how to drive a front end loader. I learned the process really well. I was digging in the aluminum industry. You take bauxite and convert that to aluminum oxide. Bauxite's just dirt. I mean, it's just dirt that's very much available here in Jamaica, and it's shipped there, and they process it. So it's dirt. So we were digging in dirt. We were in mud. I was red. It's red. It's got an iron ore kind of color, rust color. Red dirt all over every day. Slept in my office. I did have an office on a cot. Um, Complain. I mean, I didn't know any better at the time. It was, right out of school, but I learned about the process. And so it was interesting when the guys came back. It was a 9 day strike, and actually it was during Mardi Gras. So it was my first time in Louisiana. I missed my first Mardi Gras because I was stuck in the plant. But when they came back, they were shocked how much I had learned the process in the 9 days that they were gone, because you're there working 12-hour days and sleeping in a cot. So it was a good experience. I don't regret any of that at all. But you were asking about being the first woman in the plant,
Hmm.
which I was. And so the story there is, I remember as when I was there for the medical, gentleman came up to me. He was a safety leader, and he said, "Hi, welcome to our plant." And he said, "So you're new here?" And I said, "Yes, I'm just doing my medical testing today." And he goes, "So do you know what area of the plant you're going to be working in?" And this plant has 4 unit operations, and I wasn't really sure where I was going to be assigned at the time. And so I said, "I don't know yet." And he goes, "Yeah, but okay, but you're clerical." I didn't know what clerical was, to be honest. I do know now. And I said, "No, I'm not clerical. I'm an engineer." And the poor man,
Probably blew his mind.
he was so shocked. He was like, "Oh no," And I get it because back then in the plant, the engineer is like king, right? Everybody sort of defers to what the engineer says, and so for me to be there as the first as a woman engineer, it was just not something they had seen before, and so they sort of struggled with kind of what to do with me. The management of the plant were fine; they hired me, but I think that the culture there, they were just not used to that. I mean, I'm sure they are now, 30 years later, but at the time it was pretty tough. So much so that this is 1995. They had, calendars up on the wall in the control rooms with naked women on the calendar, and that was just
A
normal.
different time.
It's just, yeah. I hope it's changed there. I'm sure
Yeah,
it has. Different time, different time. And it's interesting when and we can, I don't know how where this conversation goes, but there is some level of I don't know, empathy, I guess. That, you just, if you don't know any different, right? You know better, so you do better. Okay, but first you need to start with knowing better. And so me being there, and I would just ask them questions like, well, wh- why do we have that lady on the wall? And like, tell me, like, what do you think when you look at that photograph? What are you thinking? And we would just have these kind of philosophical conversations when things were slow. And nobody took anything down while I was there. But I hope that at least it got people thinking, because these guys have wives and they have daughters and sisters. And so maybe at some point they'll say, "Huh, maybe I shouldn't have that calendar on the wall. Or maybe let's
maybe.
have some landscape or something."
Yeah, maybe that doesn't apply to my job and my work that I'm paid for.
Great. Maybe you should put like
Well,
a piping diagram or something.
there you
Yeah.
go. There you go.
Hmm.
Some some designs of
Yes,
something. Some, yeah.
something.
So and I feel like in our last conversation, we didn't get to connect on this because there was just
Hmm.
too many things to cover. But where you and I have a similar history is I got my start at a manufacturer as well, which is what led me to procurement and supply chain. I
Hmm.
learned what supply chain was when I was at this manufacturer. I was a marketer, of course,
Hmm.
still a marketer, and I got to experience the development of products at the very beginning stages. And the first stage for us was to figure out with our supply chain team where our raw materials were coming from. And so our big planning meetings, I'm, little marketer trying to plan a product launch that's happening in a year, and we're in development, and I'm learning that, okay, we start with raw materials here, and there are several phases of product development that have to take into account the materials themselves and where they come from. And so from beginning to end, I got to experience how to produce something at a manufacturer with exposure to supply chain at every stage. And then once it was produced, like, I designed the boxes for the product and did all the branding. And then in our warehouse, we had, capacity planning and all of that. So I feel like if I didn't have that manufacturing experience, I would have never had exposure to supply chain. I would have never taken this turn in my career. So tell me, like, was there a time as you transitioned into like it was IT and procurement, did you call back to your experiences in manufacturing to help you?
Mhm. First of all, I want to congratulate the organization that you were a part of that was so intentional about bringing supply chain into the decision making while you're developing your product. That is unique. It doesn't happen in a lot of places, and I will tell you, there are supply chain people around the world who complain when organizations develop a product with no consideration for the supply chain and ask them to just do magic and make it work. So, whatever organization that is, kudos to them. I hope they're
Yeah,
doing great. They deserve it.
shout out Prior Products,
Woo!
manufacturer here in Kansas City.
Indeed, indeed. So on the procurement, on my transition into IT and procurement, and maybe the broader perspective is this: that for every experience that I have, or every opportunity that I have, I always pull from my history, right? What do I already know that can create value and bring value to where I am today? And certainly when I moved into IT to help implement SAP, the reason that I was asked to do it was that I understood the manufacturing process, and they wanted somebody who understood the manufacturing process to have input into the designs in SAP. And our business is going to be the first continuous manufacturing business on SAP. And so the requirements are slightly different. They needed somebody who understood to speak on behalf of this business to have that design be appropriate. So using that manufacturing background help me in communicating that to the IT teams. From a procurement perspective, where manufacturing is probably 80% of your customer base, having the perspective of the customer and bringing that perspective into the procurement organization so that we can do the best job for them was critical. And so, sometimes you kind of have an us and them mindset. They don't give us the right specs, right? That's what procurement will say about manufacturing. Manufacturing says they are too slow, but really kind of having each of us understand why we need what we need and how that is being used, that helped me to be a better procurement person because I understood the pain of the manufacturing side, and I understood, when is it a good idea to make a change because for lower costs versus no, we want the more expensive thing because the value that we're going to get is the speed or the quality or something else. And so bringing that manufacturing background and perspective into how we think about procurement made a big difference because I could understand both sides. And I would encourage people, if you're thinking about your career, to consider roles in many areas of the organization. And it's actually a regret of mine that I never went onto the customer side. I feel like I missed that. And if I had to do it over again, I would want to have that because bringing the perspective of every element of the organization is a superpower. And really, if you want to be the CEO, for example, what a candidate for a CEO who can see all aspects of the business. So I certainly brought in that manufacturing perspective. I still do, but I think it's from a career perspective. I would encourage. I should have gone even more broadly than that.
You should have accomplished more, Camille. You should have done more somehow. You should have fit one more
you know,
career
you know.
shift. You did so many shifts. Like, I put this in my promo post a couple days ago. Like,
Hmm.
there's a difference between climbing a corporate ladder, right? A career ladder. There's sometimes you go sideways, sometimes you go up. There's like little steps.
Hmm.
Girl, you jumped from building to building. You were like, I'm in manufacturing. Now I'm in IT. Now I'm in procurement. Now I do supply chain. Now I do it all. It's like,
Well,
that's
when
a
you put
lot.
it that way, and for different companies, and you learn a lot as you move on. I don't know. Maybe we go back to that Scorpio thing, right? I always feel like there's more. I do. I'm working on it. I'll go to therapy, Catherine. I promise.
This is therapy. This
This is
this is your
it.
first session. I won't even charge you for it.
You're so kind.
Well, okay, let's transition into because it would probably take us a year to get through all of the roles that you had and those moves that you made. But what we need to know is that you did make a shift that you just spoke about, moving into more of that IT and advisory and leading um, teams for like larger implementations, right? Um, and then that, because of the context, really shifted you into procurement.
Hmm.
S- And so, and then you quickly started moving into leadership. So I don't want to like gloss over your transition into procurement, but what I think is most important from your experience that we've talked about is the evolution of you becoming a leader in procurement.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so looking back, was there like a stretch moment for you where you felt like as a leader, you weren't sure if you were ready? You said yes anyways? Like what anything in that stretch of time that you think would be helpful to share for this group?
Sure, sure. So I'll rush through maybe the procurement because I feel there is a role that I took under the umbrella of procurement that was my biggest stretch. So I left manufacturing to go into IT, implement SAP, learned a lot about the business process of supply chain, running MRP and you know uh, process orders and production orders and purchase requisitions and all those things. So going into procurement after that, while I didn't have any experience there, I had never negotiated a contract or met a supplier. Maybe I met a supplier. Um, I knew the business process. I knew what it took to run MRP and do the planning because I knew how it worked in SAP. So I brought that value to the function. I didn't find that transition that difficult for whatever reason, maybe because I had the IT and the SAP background. But there was one job that I struggled with. And so I done a couple of procurement manager roles, and we had a director role come open, and it was a director of functional excellence. And at the time, the chief procurement officer had a responsibility for logistics, trade compliance. He didn't have the supply chain, but for my piece of it, we did. And so it really was the end to end, maybe except manufacturing. And it was we had only 20 people in the group who were experts in how these things work in SAP and how they interact with each other. So the purpose of this group was to have all of the processes documented, people trained and optimized in the system. So for example, if we make a change on the customer service side, we run that change all the way through the supply chain and make sure everybody is optimized to that change and agrees with the change. It was around process and people and systems. And the other element of the job was that it was kind of I didn't know the term at the time, the chief of staff, but it sort of was the chief of staff to the chief procurement officer. And I say that now looking back. So when that role came open, I remember my boss coming into my office and said, so and so has decided he's leaving the company, and so his role is open, and you're on the succession for the role. Do you want it? um, no, that was my first thought. And I'm a praying person, so I did pray about it, and it was like, in this role, I will not be able to do this role in my own strength. With what I know today, this will be a challenge for me, and I might fail. But the guidance that I got was, you need to do this. It will stretch you. You are comfortable where you are today, and if you want to grow, then this is a role for you to grow, because this role brings the exposure and the visibility, and then it opens up your aperture to more than procurement. So you're now seeing supply chain, you're seeing customers. We talked about, in my early career, I wanted to see customers. Okay, well, here's your opportunity. And so I struggled with taking the job, but I'm so glad I did. People ask me sometimes, what was the inflection point in your career where you really took off? And that was the job. Having that role opened the aperture, so that I had procurement, I had all these processes that I was responsible for. I had the ear of the chief procurement officer of our business. And then he had a network of all the CPOs of all the divisions of Honeywell at the time. And so I had visibility with them. And it was through that visibility that the next offer came for me to lead indirect procurement for another division of Honeywell. And so, had I not taken that job, worked on sort of streamlining processes across the business, demonstrated that capability, and then have the visibility to share that with other leaders in the organization, I would not have moved up. And in this case, moved on, right? So it wasn't quite a ladder; it was a promotion, but a different business that gave me exposure to a whole different way of working. So chemicals looks a whole lot different from aerospace. So I'm glad I did, but it was a challenge to take on take on the additional responsibility, the additional learning, the discomfort that comes with not knowing, and leading experts. And so the people I led knew more about their work than I did even today. And so this was my first challenge in leading a group of people that already knew what they were doing. They didn't need to be told what to do. What they needed was information, right? Understanding what is the vision of the organization so they can do their best work and support the organization. So even my leadership um, style had to change. My earlier procurement management roles, I was hiring people. So I was doing a lot of training and getting people up to speed. In this job, there was no training. They were training me, but I was providing the leadership that they needed to be the best experts that they could be.
So this pivotal moment kind of happened to you, right? Like, I mean, you seized the
Mhm.
moment. But what advice would you give somebody, um, procurement or otherwise, that are wanting to increase their visibility? What are the practical things that they can do?
Mhm.
But, outside of waiting for someone to offer them a position outside of their comfort zone,
Indeed.
right? So what's
Indeed.
that
Indeed.
proactive list that they can
Yeah.
start working on?
I'll give you a couple. So I'll tell you what happened in this particular situation, and then I'll kind of tell you how I've sort of distilled this down. So in that particular situation, my CPO would attend this quarterly meeting with the other CPOs, and because of my relationship with him, because he had trusted me, whenever he could not attend, he would ask me to attend. So the lesson there is make yourself available to your manager to say, are there some areas that you can't go, some meetings you can't go to? I'd love to present to your team on what I'm doing. And in the meeting where he couldn't attend, I did present on some work that we had done that I had coordinated across the organization. And so that's what that new leader saw, right? When I came in and said, okay, my leader's not here, I'm going to present on his behalf, and I presented. That's what he had to go on. Plus, I think they probably did some succession planning work as well. But what advice would I give to someone? I think it's important to understand when you're thinking about um, promotion and recognition in the organization is knowing who the decision makers are. And while your manager has a part in that, he or she is not the only decision maker for you. And so understanding who they are, and they could be different in many organizations, but in the two that where I spent most of my career, you need to know the HR partner, and they must have a positive impression of you. Number two, you need to know your manager's peers, and they must have a positive impression of you. And number three, you need to know your manager's manager, and their impression of you must be positive. If you think about them knowing who you are, that's the visibility. And so you can get that in multiple ways, depending on the org culture. You can reach out to them, right? And have a conversation and tell them what you're working on. More importantly, and it's so interesting, this is probably a psychology lesson, and I'm not a psychology expert. Just listen to them. You don't even have to tell them anything. I had one leader tell me, "You are the most interesting person, Camille." And I didn't say a word, but somehow I'm interested. So listen, what is your vision? What are your goals for the year? Is there anything that I can do to help? Right. So I think that somebody being proactive enough to reach out, have that conversation, follow up on what you offer and do the thing, offer to do something to help and do the thing, when they're having discussions about who should be promoted and they're sitting in that room, who is there? Your manager, your manager's peers, their manager, and HR. And so when they're talking about, who could do this wonderful, fabulous new thing that we're going to be implementing next year? And so, and your manager says, I think Camille could do it.
It's
The
coming
last
up
thing you,
all
right?
Camille in
The
that
last thing you
meeting.
want to hear is that who's Camille? Like, that's the worst.
Right.
If if somebody says who's Camille, it's done. It doesn't matter how good I am, it's done. It's not going to happen. But if the whole room says, "Oh yes, I met with her 2 months ago, and she asked me for my vision, and she came back and gave me this really great article on such and such," or I hear she's working on this new project and it's really successful, and that's great to hear. So, but you have to own that. Your manager helps, and a good manager is going to do a great job and help you get there. But not all managers are great, and not all managers may even know that they should. And at the end of the day, my career is my responsibility. So taking those three groups would be primary: your manager's manager, your manager's peers, and your HR person.
Sound advice. Sound advice. I feel like at different points in my career, I've hit all of those things, and it has netted out great results for me. So I can confirm these. This is great. This is a great start for someone that is wanting more visibility for that long term goal of career development, and
Mhm.
who knows where you're going to end up. The stepping stones um, don't always have to be so clear when you get started.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun too, Catherine. That there are roles that I took that I like moving to aerospace. It had never occurred to me. In fact, when the idea came, I thought, oh, I want to go to aerospace. They're slow over there. And I learned a ton. I met a lot of people, and those people were great mentors to me. And I would never have had that had I said no. And so sometimes being open, you should craft your own career. You should design your own career, but be open to some detours where you
There you
think that
go.
there's something that you can learn.
I mean, only you, Camille, would say, you know what? Why not aerospace?
you know.
Let's. You know what? It's like, oh, that sounds hard. I want to do that.
Oh, did Camille do that once?
Yeah. So you're you're kind of in a different stage of your career now, right?
Mhm.
You're in the next chapter. Tell us about that.
Sure. So, as of the middle of last year, I made the decision to exit the corporate world. And I think in the olden days, it was go find your future, chase my dream. Um, my family, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. I was of the six of us, I was the only one that had a corporate job and not running their own business. And so that means that I was, the low achiever of the family, and I needed to fix it. um,
In
so
no
I'm
world are
taking.
you a low achiever.
So I'm on a couple of journeys. I am building a coaching business, and so I have some clients now that I'm working with, and having these conversations, but one on one. We actually did a group coaching cohort that ended we did 6 months. It ended last month. That was quite successful, and shared some of these things, but also really kind of listen to where people are, and how they want to craft their career. So that's happening. When I do speak at ISM World, the surprise there is that people who join my session will have a free coaching session from me coming after that session. So that's why you need to come. And then the second thing that I'm doing, as I mentioned, that my family is entrepreneurial, is I kind of feel like it's too late to start a business. Yes, I'll do the coaching, but another business. And so I'm actually on an entrepreneur an acquisition journey. In fact, I have an offer. I have a meeting next tomorrow. I made an offer on a business that I can't talk about, but I'm excited about that because this particular business has some great alignment with coaching. And so I was very intrigued with what they're doing and how I can leverage some of those assets as I continue to build out my coaching practice. So I'm, you know, Hopefully we'll all work out, and we'll be able to do the close the acquisition and add this to the coaching practice that I have.
I can't wait to see what this business is. If if it works out, hopefully it
Yeah.
will.
Thank you.
And what kind of coaching are you doing?
So my target audience for coaching is mid-career professionals that are looking to move into their first manager role, and we talk about these things around visibility and branding and executive presence, or managers and directors who are looking to then move up to the vice president level. But ultimately, when you think about coaching, the best coach is a good listener, and so, really, anyone can benefit from coaching. And I think even executives, where they're struggling with making a decision, some of the principles around coaching is that the person has the answer to their question, and so it takes the coach to ask the right questions to help the person elicit the answers that they need, because they have the answer. We don't have the answer. In fact, sometimes we are challenged as coaches to not give advice, to keep our advice to ourselves and allow the person being coached to come up with that, because the idea is that the the guidance that you're gonna follow your own guidance before you follow guidance from somebody else. And so sometimes I have to stop myself, or at least excuse myself before I do. I'll say, look, this is not standard coaching, but you asked for my advice. So here's my advice, but let's go back to coaching because it needs to be you. Right. And you think about a lot of the ahas that we have in life. The aha didn't come from somebody else. The aha came from the inside. But it could be that something someone did or said or asked, but ultimately that awareness and that insight is something that you already had inside. And so that's what I do in my coaching, is to help you find the answer that you already know.
Well, I can tell you for sure, I am not at the coaching phase of my career because I am still trying to tell people the answers.
Are they listening?
They are, and I'm listening. I'm in that position where I'm listening and learning from the executives that I have exposure to. I'm still in sponge mode, and so I'm getting coached probably in a way that I'm not even aware of. Yeah.
That's the best kind of coaching, right? I mean, I think about people in my life who have just spoken into me, and we didn't talk about this before, but when I started my career, as much as we talked about, I thought I could go far. But I got broken at Stanford, and this part never came back while I was there. I never had the aspiration to be a vice president or senior vice president. When I started my career, like, well, great, I have a degree in engineering, so I'm going to go engineer. I just thought that's what I would do the rest of my life. Um, but there was a time, there was somebody we had just bought, well, Honeywell bought UOP. We were doing some integration work, and I was working with one of their procurement managers. And he stopped by my office one evening and he said, Camille, I've really, I've really enjoyed working with you the last few weeks. And I'll tell you, I see you as a vice president one day. Now, this time I was a manager. I'm very happy in my manager life, doing my manager thing. And I don't remember what I said to him. I probably just said, thank you. I appreciate you, blah, blah. But he just planted a little seed that never left. And it's not that I was pursuing a vice president role, but as other opportunities came, it just opened the aperture of what I could do because of those little words that he said to me. And I think as leaders, we don't realize how much influence we have in our words with people, whether positive or negative. His words meant a ton. And he was the first call that I made when I had my first vice president job, because it wasn't anything that I had thought about at all. So I do, and so he did some level of coaching to say, look, you don't be satisfied with where you are today. And all he said was, I see you as. And so you're right. I think that we're getting coaching in different ways, and we're getting influence in different ways. And it's up to us to take those lessons and apply them in our lives.
So what's the legacy? What's Camille's legacy that you're trying to leave? Because
Yeah.
listen, I know you've accomplished a lot. but what's deep down? What's at the core of all
Mhm,
of that?
mhm. I mentioned we talked about um, me teaching for a while, and when I did, I loved it, and I realized that's really who I am. And so my legacy is to build tomorrow's leaders. And that's leadership in the corporate environment, that's leadership in the entrepreneurial environment, it's leadership in academics, and it's leadership in our families. I do think that the more leaders we build, the kinder we are, and the right kind of leadership, right?
Right.
The kinder we are to each other, the more collaborative we are with each other, we can accomplish so much as as a company, as a country, as a globe, if we build strong leaders. And so that's the legacy that I want to leave.
I love it. I love it. And um I really appreciate that you started your career very first thing as a teacher, and you're coming back full circle. And
Yeah,
even when you were in implementation, you were a teacher of a
true.
certain kind, very specific
Click
teaching.
here.
Yeah, but when we go back to the mantra of multiplying your effectiveness, what better way
Mhm,
than being a coach, being a teacher?
mhm.
Um, so here we are. We just wrote your
Yeah.
first outline of your book.
There we go. Yeah.
Someday, I feel like you have to write a book. Put that
Okay.
in your planning. One more
Yes,
thing, just
ma'am.
add to
Yeah,
the list.
I'll add that to the list.
Well, it's what a pleasure. What a pleasure to go deeper and to share your stories and the lessons. I feel like anybody listening that whether you're at that midpoint in your career and wanting to level up, or if you're wanting to just get some advice specifically in procurement, supply chain, manufacturing, engineering. I mean, there's a lot to choose from with Camille. You everybody could take something from this conversation today, and I hope that if something sparked in the minds of our listeners, that they reach out to you, or you're on LinkedIn,
On
obviously.
LinkedIn. That's the best way to reach me.
You guys go find Camille, reach out, say hi, and I feel like if you're going to be joining any of the ISM events, especially ISM World coming up in Orlando, please find Camille, say hi, and ask her about that special, what was it,
The
the
gift
coaching session? Yeah,
one
the special
coaching
gift.
session. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. And if you're not able to catch this, please catch up on YouTube. We've got all of our episodes there. And it's been such a pleasure. I hope you all come back and join us next month, third week of May. We're skipping to the third week. We have Kim Master, who is head of IT procurement at Netflix, joining us for a wonderful conversation. We've just been hitting all the ladies in procurement, and I love it. We're on a streak right now. And Camille, um, I want to follow back up with you and find out about how this deal and this acquisition goes for you. Please let us all know so that we can support you for the rest of
Thank you.
your new journey.
Thank you, Catherine. You've been an excellent host, and I appreciate you keeping me on track.
We had a lot of fun. All right. Goodbye, everyone. See you next time.